Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into the invisible financial giant that manages more wealth than almost any country on Earth. I mean, imagine a company so incredibly powerful that it actively influences the fate of entire nations, yet a lot of people have never even heard its name. We're going to explore exactly how one single firm quietly and methodically became one of the most dominant financial institutions in human history.
So, let's just jump right into this massive question. When you look past the governments and those giant tech titans dominating our news feeds, who is really pulling the strings of the global economy? Because, when we think about power, we usually focus on the entities we can actually see. We think about politicians making laws or the big consumer brands that fill up our homes. But the true center of gravity in the modern financial system, it operates completely out of the spotlight.
It's kind of fascinating, right? You and I interact with Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, and Google literally every single day. But BlackRock is entirely different. They don't manufacture smartphones, they aren't selling you software, and they definitely aren't dropping packages off at your front door. Actually, they don't sell a single consumer product. Yet they're the quiet architects sitting right behind almost every major corporation you interact with, because they own massive shares in pretty much all of these household names.
To really put their scale into perspective, consider this. BlackRock currently manages over $10 trillion in assets. Let that number just sink in for a second. $10 trillion. That's a figure that completely dwarfs the entire economic output of major, highly developed nations. We're talking larger than the entire GDP of Germany, larger than Japan. It's literally larger than most nations on Earth combined.
All right, let's get into Section 1, the origin, building from failure. To really understand BlackRock, we have to rewind back to 1988. The founder, Larry Fink, had built a super successful career in bond trading on Wall Street, but then disaster struck. He made a remarkably bad bet that ended up costing his firm nearly $100 million. And in the high-stakes world of Wall Street, a catastrophic loss like that, that's an immediate career ender. You pack your desk in a cardboard box and you go home.
But here's the crucial point. Instead of just throwing in the towel, Larry learned a profoundly important lesson from that devastating loss. He realized that these massive financial institutions were taking on enormous risks without actually understanding them. He knew there had to be a fundamentally better, safer way to manage capital. So he founded BlackRock, not as some giant investment firm right out of the gate, but strictly as a firm focused on understanding and managing financial risk better than anyone else out there.
Which brings us to Section 2, Aladdin, the secret weapon.
Now, you might reasonably assume that an investment firm's greatest asset is just, cash. But BlackRock's true leverage, the absolute game changer that sets them apart from every other firm on Wall Street, isn't their bank accounts. It's their unprecedented access to global financial data. Over the years, they've built a highly sophisticated technology platform just to process all that information.
Enter their proprietary system, known as Aladdin. That stands for Asset, Liability, Debt, and Derivative Investment Network, and it acts as the central nervous system of global finance. We are absolutely not talking about a simple spreadsheet here. Aladdin is a computational beast that has literally woven itself into the very fabric of the world's financial infrastructure.
To give you a sense of what it actually does, Aladdin analyzes financial markets in real time. It monitors risk, tracks massive global investments, runs endless simulations, and predicts possible economic outcomes. Today, major banks, insurance companies, pension funds, and even governments rely entirely on Aladdin. It oversees tens of trillions of dollars globally, essentially allowing BlackRock to see the financial world and its impending shifts long before anyone else even has a clue.
Moving right along to Section 3, Crises and ETF Revolutions.
Think back to the 2008 financial crisis. Banks were collapsing, Lehman Brothers failed, and global markets were just crashing. Governments were in absolute total panic. But interestingly enough, that panic became BlackRock's biggest opportunity. Because of their unmatched expertise in risk, the U.S. government explicitly hired BlackRock to step in and analyze all those complex toxic assets that were tanking the economy. Central banks suddenly relied on them, instantly transforming BlackRock from mere money managers into the ultimate trusted crisis advisors. Every crisis creates winners, and BlackRock, they emerged as the absolute biggest.
Building on that massive wave of global trust, they leaned heavily into a financial tool called the Exchange Traded Fund, or ETF. Instead of trying to pick single winning stocks, ETFs allow investors to effortlessly buy a piece of the entire market all at once. It's a basket of stocks. It's cheaper, it's way simpler, and it completely revolutionized how everyday capital is deployed.
BlackRock saw this trend coming and pulled off a strategic masterstroke. They acquired iShares, one of the world's largest ETF providers. By leaning so hard into ETFs, they positioned themselves perfectly at the exact moment millions of everyday investors started shifting away from risky stock picking towards safer, passive investing. And the result? Massive, continuous streams of global capital just started flowing directly into BlackRock funds, month after month, year after year. It turned them into an unstoppable growth machine.
Okay, let's get into Section 4, Influence versus Ownership. You've definitely heard this phrase thrown around online and in the media. People look at the data, they see BlackRock's name attached to everything from real estate to the tech sector, and they ask, does BlackRock really own the world? Like, is it actually true that a single company literally holds the deeds and titles to the entire global economy?
Well, here is the vital distinction for this whole explainer. It is the difference between ownership and influence. BlackRock does not actually own all that money themselves. They manage money on behalf of their clients. That $10 trillion, that actually belongs to massive pension funds, institutional investors, sovereign governments, and everyday folks like you and me. However, because BlackRock controls exactly where that staggering amount of money goes, they gain an absolutely incredible amount of leverage.
And honestly, this is why influence is vastly more powerful than pure ownership. Because BlackRock represents millions of shares and thousands of different corporations, they are the ones casting the shareholder votes. When BlackRock votes on corporate boards, executives are forced to listen. When they speak publicly on environmental or climate policies, massive companies alter their operations. And when BlackRock signals a shift in their investment strategy, entire global markets react instantly.
Naturally, operating at this unfathomable scale sparks a pretty fierce and ongoing debate. On one side, critics strongly argue that a single asset manager has gathered way too much influence over corporate America, and they question if one voice should really carry that much weight in a free market. On the exact opposite side, supporters firmly argue that BlackRock is simply doing its job, efficiently managing money for its clients. They argue that this massive, unprecedented scale is exactly what helps everyday investors achieve better, safer returns. It's a really complex debate. But regardless of which side you lean toward, their central role in the system is completely undeniable. Let's look ahead. Section 5, the future of finance.
So where do you go when you already have $10 trillion in unparalleled influence? You definitely don't stay still. They are aggressively moving into the foundational sectors of tomorrow. They're pouring resources into artificial intelligence, expanding deeply into private markets, and heavily funding global infrastructure projects. They are also taking massive positions in renewable energy and actively exploring the wild frontier of digital assets. They are literally looking everywhere.
BlackRock understands one fundamental truth about high finance. Money follows the future. To maintain their iron grip on global dominance, they know they have to constantly and aggressively position themselves wherever capital is going to flow next. Because in this ultra-competitive world, staying still doesn't just mean you stop growing. Staying still means you fall behind.
So let's summarize how they actually built this empire. It wasn't by creating a better smartphone or writing a viral social media algorithm. They built it by methodically establishing unshakable trust during times of sheer global panic. They built it by monopolizing data analysis with their Aladdin system so they could essentially see the future first. And finally, they built it by securing permanent, continuous access to global capital through the boom of everyday passive investing.
As we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with something to chew on. In a world where money dictates the direction of innovation, policy, and society itself, who truly holds the ultimate power? Is it the famous companies designing the products we use every day, or is it the invisible giant quietly managing the capital behind them all? The next time you use a popular product, buy a service, or see a massive corporate headline, just ask yourself, who is really steering the ship? Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you in the next explainer.